In this video segment and lesson, we want to begin looking at developing our pastoral psychology. What does it mean to develop a sense of self? Whenever you're working with people, patients in the hospital, or even in your congregations, you need to have a good pastoral psychology. A good pastoral psychology is one that empowers you and enables you to ask good questions. A sign of a good pastoral psychology is whether or not it informs you to the point that helps you to make assessment questions. And so in this segment, I want to discuss how we go about developing a personality, developing a sense of self, developing a self, developing the structure of the personality. All of these will be pivotal as we become more competent in our pastoral care giving. What is personality? According to Webster, personality refers to the quality or condition of being a person. The totality of qualities and traits as of character or behavior that are particular to a specific person. The pattern of collective character, behavioral, temperamental, emotional, and mental traits of a person. Distinctive qualities of a person, especially those distinguishing personal characteristics that make one socially appealing. A person as an embodiment of distinctive traits of mind or behavior. Personality. So we want to study some ideas about how folks begin to think in terms of developing a personality. Now, in order to develop a personality, we want to first of all look at understanding human personality according to Freud. Sigmund Freud, is considered to be the father of human psychology. Freud said that personality consisted of three basic structures. The id, which he referred to or became known as the pleasurable principle. It's also referred to, the id is referred to as motivational forces called instincts, drives, or wishes. The id says, I want what I want now. It is the first structure of personality according to Freud. It is amoral, not capable of considering the consequences of one's action or the moral values involved in these actions. If human beings were an automobile, the id would be the engine because it has all of these instincts, drives, and wishes. The development of instincts and drives, according to Freud, became known what he called the primary process. The second part of Freud's personality structure has to do with what he called the ego. It relates the organism to reality. What is real? What is reality? It functions according to and guided by the reality principle. And it is what we generally call the self. It seeks ways to meet the needs arising from the first part of the structure of Freud's personality, which is the id. This problem-solving activity is what Freud called the secondary process. The id, primary, the ego, secondary. Ego continued. Ego serves as a go-between then, the id, and what he later called the superego. And thus the ego is called the executive, providing decision-making for the needs of the personality to be fulfilled based on realities, mores, and socially acceptable behavior. Ego sends the appropriate decision message to the brain, according to Freud, and muscles for gratification. Sends the decision-making message to the brain and muscles for gratification and experience of pleasure based on reality. People with weak egos, you've often heard probably in informal discussion that, oh, well, that person has a weak ego. If that is the case in true fashion, according to Freud, then that person has difficulty dealing with the id impulses, the id desires, the id wishes. People with too strong of an ego are typically seen as egocentristic and are concerned about their needs to the exclusion of others. The ego versus the id, which is what you're born with, so to speak, according to Freud, the ego begins development around 16 months of age. If the human beings were an automobile, the ego would be the steering wheel. Okay, we got the id, which is the engine, and now we've got the ego, which is the steering wheel, kind of guiding all that power of energy of the id. All right. Then Freud adds the superego, part of the personality guided by principles of moral attitude, values, and the conscience. It is the record of things to avoid. It is developed by age 7, according to Freud. And if the id and the ego are in agreement, it is the superego that decides if an action is morally right or wrong. An overdeveloped superego, typically folks with an overdeveloped superego are neurotic or over concerned at a time about other people, often to the neglect of their own thoughts and feelings. An underdeveloped superego are usually self-centered and unconcerned about the thoughts of others. There's no check on the ego and the id. If human beings were an automobile, then the superego would be the brakes. And these three parts of the personality can be diagrammed as such. And if they're all functioning equally, then they're all balanced, so to speak. The id with the desires, wishes, and energy, and the ego assessing reality, see if it's safe, the decision maker, and the superego, what is moral, in fulfilling the id desire. Okay, as long as all of these parts of the person are in operation, the id desires can be appropriately gratified or delayed. But if either are too strong or weak, we have a neurotic problem or a behavioral problem. When the ego is weak, our sense of self is weak, according to Freud, and this is what he called the neurotic problem. Now, if the superego is weak, and I'm demonstrating a weak superego by making this circle smaller, but if it's weak, then Freud would call this a behavioral problem. A behavioral problem. So Freud's structural drive theory is what it was called. Drive theory. Id, ego, superego. And there are some other key concepts. I won't belabor these because I'm not a Freudian psychotherapist. But life instinct, there is this life instinct that's part of the energy. It's the motivational energy called libido. And it means desire, willfulness, and lust, and so forth. You know, whenever we are lusting or we're making comments about lust, we're often referring to our libido. Not only did Freud believe that there was a life instinct, but he also, there was a death instinct. There was an unconscious wish to die, according to his theoretical concepts. Now, again, I don't know that much about these two, so I'm not going to belabor those. But let's move on. Besides the components of the personality, there is the process of personality development. Now, this is very important. Components and process. Freud initiated a theory of personality development from birth. The theory of personality was primarily task-oriented, and certain tasks and goals needed to be accomplished to move on to the next foundation task. Personality development process was called psychosocial development, and there were several of these. The oral stage, which he termed to be from birth about to 18 months. And then the anal stage was from about 19 months to 4 years of age. The phallic or Oedipus stage, 4 years to 7 years. And then latency stage, 7 to 12, and the gentle stage from about 13 until. According to Freud, this was his personality development process. Not only do you need a structure of personality, but you also need a process of personality development. Character development by Freud. If you have difficulties in any one of these tasks associated with these stages, weaning, potty training, finding your sexual identity, you will tend to retain certain infantile habits. Freud called this a fixation. Example, first 8 months, oral aggressive character develops if you're frustrated and you need to suckle or wean too early. And between 5 and 8 months, teething starts, and satisfaction or gratification when you teeth is to bite, something like mommy's nipple. If this causes a negative response on the part of the mother or early weaning, oral aggressive personality develops. These people bite on things, gums, and other people. Anal stage, and 4 months. If we go whenever we go at first, and then the powers that be put limits on that. And we call this the anal aggressive personality. Sloppy or disorganized, generous to a fault, cruel, destructive, given to vandalism. Anal retentive. Other parents try to be strict, and they use punishment or humiliation. The child becomes constipated. She tries to desperate. These people tend to be perfectionistic. Well, I'm running out of time, but this gives you a brief introduction to Freud. May the Lord be with you.